Hello, everyone. Art McDermott here. We are doing the Eat Right for Life presentation today for Anthem EAP. I thank you for joining me and looking forward to this one. A little bit, very quickly, background on me, your presenter for today. Again, it's Art McDermott, and I'm a certified nutritionist, so this presentation is right in my wheelhouse. That's why I really enjoy presenting this one. My background is also in strength and conditioning and fitness, which obviously we'll touch on a bit as well today. So we're going to cover a lot of ground, and I'm looking forward to it. And let's just jump right into this and get through the material. We do have a lot to cover. I hope you, if you want to, take some notes, have a pen and paper ready, and there'll be a lot of good information we're going to send your way. So let's move on to the first slide and jump right in here. Here are the objectives. First, we're going to understand what food your body needs for optimum health. We're going to navigate the foods and the food marketing based on sound nutritional advice. And I can tell you right now that the food marketing is really problematic for Americans because we do have a lot of trouble with companies that are maybe less than straightforward about their labeling and what they can say and can't say and the legal definitions and a lot. So the way I phrase it is the marketing companies are better at what they do than we are at saying no. So just bear that in mind while we walk through all of this. We're also going to learn to manage weight, energy, and long-term health with nutrition guidance. And there's a lot of considerations there. So as you can see, quite a range of motion here. Towards the end, we're going to get into tips on healthy eating while on the run, which obviously in a corporate setting and business setting is crucial. And it presents a huge problem in today's nutrition and what's available to us while we are on the road. And finally, we're going to wrap it up with take a look at the USDA current recommendations from the government. It's called My Plate. I'm sure you've probably heard of it. This is, thankfully, a replacement for the old food pyramid that was dating back to the 70s and 80s, which was quite problematic. And even today, however, though, there's a couple of issues that we want to point out when we do get to that slide. So let's move right along to the next slide, and we'll jump right in. We're going to start off with the benefits of eating right. Eating correctly here. So there are three main categories we're concerned with. The first one is quality of life, all right? This is going to touch on two issues. One is weight management, of course, and with the current stats showing that upwards of 60% or more of Americans and children are overweight or obese. You can imagine the level of that problem. And also I'm going to touch on disease prevention. When you start talking about quality of life, disease prevention is it. And the important thing to point out there on disease prevention is that the vast majority of diseases, they say upwards of 60 to 70% of hospital visits and doctor's office visits are preventable. They are lifestyle, I call them lifestyle decisions. They are directly impacted by how we eat and how much exercise we do or don't do. Is the actual source of disease. A lot of diseases now is not some random condition that strikes you from the blue or strikes someone you know randomly. Oftentimes we're bringing on these disease conditions ourselves, and they're entirely preventable. Next, we're going to talk about the immediate benefits. Like, what are the short-term impacts for eating right? And number one thing you're going to notice is the increases in energy. Our body loves to have a balanced, nutritious diet. The common American diet, or Western diet as it's called, is loaded with processed carbohydrates that actually depress our energy levels and our moods, because the next point there, the improved and controlled mood. It's interesting because some people think like, oh, I woke up in a bad mood today. Again, as if that were kind of a random thing, but it's amazing how much control we really have on our moods. It is not something that we get struck with on a daily basis. We usually tie in a poor mood or sluggishness with a lack of sleep, right? And that can certainly be true, but definitely much more of it's got to do with our nutrition and our overall lifestyle, because we can improve our own mood and control our moods with two simple decisions revolving around sleep and nutrition. And finally, you want to consider the connection with ourselves and others, all right? Meaning, the food, obviously the benefits of eating right contribute directly with longevity. The better you eat, the longer you live. I mean, this is kind of common sense. If you have really poor, very, very poor quality diet, certainly going to impact how long you live. And unfortunately, people just seem to ignore that piece of it. And self-confidence, all right? That's going to tie directly to weight management. If you manage your weight well, you're at a healthy weight for your height and that type of thing and your age, then your self-confidence soars. So all those things are interconnected. We tend to compartmentalize these things, right? Keep food separate from mood, just separate from our mindset, and just separate from our physical self. All of them are directly interconnected. So let's move on to the next slide and take a look at our next topic, which is, well, this is our when I talk about eating colorfully and eating wide range of the palate, as you hear. This is a great picture of it right here. This is moving on to the healthy lifestyle. So we're going to roll right into, as I mentioned, the exercise piece. You can't talk about the benefits of eating correctly or eating on the road or any of that without talking about exercise. Please bear in mind that as humans, we were meant to be very physical, right? If you think about 100 years ago, there wasn't even a need for a gym. There were no such things because life was our gym. We had to pull and push and run and drag and carry and tote and load, and all of these very, very physical things were part of everyday life. And all of a sudden we went in a blink of an eye, as far as our body's concerned, to sitting for 6, 8 or more hours a day. It's really a dramatic and negative shift for our physiology to do that, right? So exercise needs to be part of our everyday lifestyle. We need to do something physical every day. Now, I work with a lot of clients in my other world, as it were, through online coaching and wellness coaching. And you can imagine there are 2 top issues that come up as problematic all the time. We'll get to the top one on the list next here, but this one, sleep, is number 2, a very close second place on the biggest problems that people face these days is sleep. I say to people, well, you should get 6 to 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep, and you can almost hear them laughing. They're like, no, because they feel nobody gets that. Certainly not uninterrupted. They have trouble falling asleep, or they have trouble staying asleep, and it's very poor quality sleep when they do get it. And the expression I always use with people is fix sleep first. If you fix sleep, you're going to suddenly find that everything else falls into place really smoothly. All right, so if you start there, if you're not sure where to start with your health journey, fix sleep first. The next one, however, is number 1 on the list as far as problems for the average adults, and particularly adults, by the way, over age 45. This tends to be more of an issue because you've got maybe kids in school, aging parents, stress at work, you're at your peak earning years, theoretically. There's so much going on. It's called the sandwich generation, right? There's a lot on your plate, as it were, and stress, controlling stress needs to be prioritized because, in my opinion, stress is probably the one that kills people more than anything, but it's invisible, right? I mean, I have high blood pressure. Well, you have high blood pressure for a reason. And a lot of that, if it's not directly to weight related and sedentary lifestyle related, it's stress related. So stress needs to be addressed. It is a silent killer. Humans are not very well designed to deal with what's called chronic stress. We are designed to deal with acute stress, right? If you think evolutionarily, we're designed to deal with, run away from the enemy and not be conquered and then sit down and come back to baseline. Right, or chase someone down, chase an animal down, to get dinner, to feed the family, very stressful, and then come back to baseline. Those are called acute stress, right? Fight or flight response type activities. We are meant to deal with those, but chronic stress, not so much. Right, and next, it's a very simple thing, and I tell people this is the least expensive weight control method there is hydration. It really doesn't cost any money, theoretically, to drink plenty of water every day, and I saw a really good chart recently about how it's related to body weight and how much water you should take in a day. That whole old rule that you hear about 6 to 8 glasses of water a day, well, in my opinion, that's a good starting point, probably not the end goal. It needs to be above that, right? Particularly if your body weight is, let's say, in excess of 200 pounds, you need to be drinking more water than you would imagine. Right. So, and then finally, the healthy lifestyle involves that ability to make smart choices while traveling and on the road. The chain foods, the fast food places do not make this easy, right? It's quick, it's appealing, it tastes good. It's supposed to, right? It's designed to make you come in. The marketing is designed to make you come in, right? But that's not a good choice. Remember, if it's quick and easy, it's probably bad for you, right? So keep those 4 key things in mind when it comes to a healthy lifestyle. And we'll jump on to the next slide and move along. The next topic is going to be, what are some of the components of a healthy diet? Because you'd be amazed at what people think is healthy, but it actually isn't. Right? It's not healthy at all, but we've been convinced by marketing and historically from the 70s, 80s to believe certain things are healthy when they're not. So number one, we're going to start with variety. And this involves smart food combinations. That means vegetables with lean meats and whole grains with a lot of vegetables. All those things, you're going to hear the same themes reported, right? Vegetables, you can never go wrong. Of course, you're not deep frying them, but with vegetables, you can't go wrong. And lean meats with a minimum inclusion of red meat. People are slowly migrating away from that, though I will put an asterisk there to say that if it's grass-fed beef, it is much, much better for you than traditional, commercially grown meat that the Americans are used to, right? If you can move away from that, stick with the red meat. If you're going to eat red meat, it should be grass-fed, right? And keep in mind, another little trick to remember is healthy foods that don't have to stay cold. Those are the ones you want to keep handy. Like, here's some examples: apples, mixed nuts, all these kind of things that can sit out, tomatoes, can sit out at room temperature, not have to be chilled or kept in the fridge for longer periods of time, all right? And also, when it comes to variety, you want to eat a wide variety of foods, not just healthy foods. So some people fall into the same habit. They eat the same foods, prepared the same way, and in the same amount, day in and day out, week after week, year after year, and even decade after decade, and your body doesn't like that. It wants variety, okay? So make sure you're mixing up your food, many different types of food. The next one we're going to talk about when it comes to the components of a healthy diet is balance. How much, when, and where. Now, of those 3, I'm more concerned with how much than anything else, right? When you talk about how much, that's portion size. And Americans are very, very well known for massive portion sizes. Everyone knows that restaurant in town that gives the huge, huge servings, and everyone say, well, boy, what a great value that is, right? Are they really doing you a great service, though? Are they really providing great value? No, of course not, all right? They're really not, unless you're disciplined enough to break that up into multiple meals and have 2 or 3 meals from that one large serving. Then maybe you can justify that type of thing, but normally people don't do that. They eat the entire plate of it, and that's how you're going to get into trouble. Now, when and where. When talks about nutrient timing. All right, that's the fancy name for when you eat. You want to strive to not eat food close to bedtime. Right, that is, try to have all your consumption done by 8 p.m. Is a healthy way to do it. That's what I have found anyway. Mornings don't tend to be too much of an issue unless it's pure American carbohydrate-based diet like donuts and juice and toast and cereal, all those kind of unhealthy options there. But when the problem tends to be in the evening. Right? People get home from a long day at work, maybe a long commute. It's been hours and hours since they've had food, and that tends to be the real problem. Now, where you eat, we're not necessarily just talking on the go here. Like, are you sitting in front of a TV? Are you standing? Are you sitting at the table, interacting and communicating with other members of the family? Right? That's one very, very important consideration. That's going to give you that good balance. It's going to actually help digestion. All those things come into play as far as the components of a healthy diet. Let's make sure, and there's a great book out there I'd like to refer you to called In Defense of Food from Michael Pollan, and he talks a lot about just eating for the enjoyment of eating and not making it a chore, not making it a refueling task to be done in the least amount of time possible. All those things have a negative connotation around food, and the book does a real good job of trying to change all that. So the next topic we're going to talk about is smart choices, right? Limiting certain foods. It's really, I can sit here all day and say, let's have more vegetables, eat more lean meat. That's all great, but you have to be able to have the discipline to limit the stuff with sugar and the stuff with wheat products. Those 2 things are highly addictive. The food companies know it, and that's why you see so much sugar and so many wheat products in so many different types of food. All right, all those. The next one then, natural versus processed. Processed food is generally processed wheat products. All right, bear that in mind when you look at the ingredients and you see wheat. Well, it's there for a reason because the food companies know you're going to want more of that. All right, they're a business like any other, so you want to limit those foods, okay? You want to prepare healthy foods that you can bring with you for days away from home. Now, what this calls for and what this describes actually is the number one problem I see, the mistake that people make in my experience when they run into trouble with weight management, okay, and eating properly. They don't prepare ahead of time. So when it comes to those emergency situations, you're absolutely starving, your blood sugar is very low, you really want some food quickly, and your brain is saying, hey, eat, 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 eat. If you don't have food prepared, you're going to make a poor choice, right? You're going to have the pizza, you're going to have the donuts, you're going to have the sweets, right? Because your brain is craving sugar and tells you to eat right away. So preparing healthy foods you can bring with you is one really powerful way to avoid all that. Okay, so let's move along here to the next topic we're going to touch on our next slide is going to be, excuse me, smart food combinations. Okay. Now, everyone knows about carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. That's what's called macronutrients, right? Those are the three categories. There aren't any others, right? Everything that we consume falls into one of these categories. So let's take a closer look at them. Now, carbohydrates, you want to limit yourself to foods that are loaded with fiber and give us instant energy for fuel for our brains. Our brains, unless you're doing a ketogenic diet, which is a whole different topic entirely, we're not going to get into that here today, but your brain burns sugar for energy. It recognizes sugar as a preferred food, right? Now, your brain doesn't care whether it's table sugar or the healthy complex carbohydrates from whole grains. Doesn't make that differentiation. It just wants that type of food. So it's up to you to make the conscious decision to get foods that are loaded with fiber and have nutritional value as well. Keep in mind, 100% of vegetables are carbohydrates. Okay, so even though carbs get a bad reputation now, well, vegetables fall into that category, so it's not all bad news there. Okay, the next one is protein, and now typically Americans get plenty of protein in the diet. That's generally not an issue of the older population. That tends to drop off because proteins do generally require more preparation time. So that can be an issue for a lot of people. As they get older, the energy levels maybe aren't what they used to be. So they don't take the time to prepare a lot of protein. This is why you see, protein drinks being made available to the older population, things like that. But proteins help us focus and repair our body's muscles and cells. For example, most of the enzymes in our bodies are protein-based. So it's really important that you get enough protein. I had a really good question on this the other day, is how much protein is enough? Well, if you take your body weight and multiply it by about 0.75 or so, that's going to get you in the ballpark. Now, as you can see, for some people, it's a pretty high number, right? And it's going to take an effort, a conscious effort to get there in that case. So please be aware of that when you're doing your daily calculations, that don't fall way behind in that category. Finally, there's fats. And most of you remember from the 70s and 80s that fats got a really bad reputation, right? Everything had to be fat-free, but all it meant was high sugar, right? So there really wasn't a good switch for our society, okay? So, but because fats are good for us, and here's the expression to remember: fats do not make us fat; carbs make us fat, okay? So that's very, very important for all our cells. It keeps us fuller longer, and all our hormones, testosterone, estrogen, even cholesterol, which is not, by the way, necessarily a bad thing. All those hormones that we in our body are fat-based. We need fat to produce them. So don't vilify fat as the big bad guy. Right? It's not that way anymore. So keep that in mind. Now we want to combine all three at every snack or meal for your best energy level, your best satisfaction level. Okay, keep that in mind as we move on to the next slide and think about your own food combinations that you've eaten maybe today. Excuse me. Now here's an important consideration that comes up quite a bit now, and we're seeing a slow, steady, and I have to say, frankly, beneficial transition to organic versus traditionally grown food. So let's take a closer look here. Now, the organic section is now a regular section at most grocery stores, right? It used to be the exception, right? Whole Foods was the only place you could find organic stuff, and it was so expensive, and you just couldn't track it down. But that's finally starting to change. Now, organic, when it comes to fruit and vegetables, they use natural fertilizers like manure and compost, right? Animals that are fed organic diets and are given access to outdoor and free environment. Those are the major things that differentiate organic from conventional, right? When you talk about conventional, the fruits and vegetables are grown with chemical fertilizers. All right. Now, here's the issue on fruits and vegetables: is those chemicals can work their way into the actual meat of the fruit and of the vegetables, and that's why we see such an increase in the presence of fertilizers and runoff into our food supply. Right? Animals are given by antibiotics and growth hormones. Now, they're given that to help prevent disease, right? But they're also given those just to grow bigger and fatter. So none of those things are necessarily healthy because, again, you can't prevent those chemicals from getting into the actual meat, okay, of the product, of whatever it is, whatever food you're discussing at the moment, okay? So let's keep those in mind. Again, we see a lot of those things changing now as more organic food becomes available and becomes more affordable, which is a great thing to see. So moving right along to the next slide, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to look at how the government regulates organic food versus other foods. So organic foods must meet strict governmental requirements to be labeled organic. That actually is a legal definition, right, or USDA certified. Those two things, if they're in a label, that's a legal designation. Things to consider, there are other words that don't have any legal meaning. We'll talk about those in a second. So cost. Organic foods are generally limited in quality and not mass-produced, although that is slowly changing. They do cost more to produce. That's why you do see an increase in pricing there, because the commercial food industry really has it down, right? They've got their costs nailed down. They know how to cut the corners and where to save the money. So to do it organically does cost more. There's strictly a sense of economics there, okay? There are very strict standards set by the government when it comes to being certified, right? There are words like all natural, and there are some other ones out there like 100% natural. Those have no legal meaning, and I could put that on anything I wanted to. I could put it on Diet Coke if I wanted to, 100% natural. Well, because I can make the argument that everything in there comes from nature in some way, eventually, previously. So that is a vague word. So when you see that on the label, just dismiss it. It has no legal meaning. So here are some important facts from the USDA. To be 100% organic, that means to use this phrase, the products must either be completely organic or made of all organic ingredients. What does that mean, organic ingredients? Well, the product must be at least 95% organic to use this term. Now, there are plenty of people who would argue that needs to be 100%, because 5% opens the door, doesn't it, right, for unscrupulous food companies to maybe put something in there that is far from organic, okay? So keep all that in mind as we go on to the next slide. And we're going to look at, back to our variety topic. What does it mean to have a variety of carbohydrates? As we mentioned, fruits and vegetables, each color has its own health benefits, so you want to eat them all. Getting 9 servings a day is extremely challenging, right? Be the first to admit it. When you talk about fruits and vegetables, getting 9 is difficult. Now, I will put an asterisk here, right? Here's a word of warning. If weight management is an issue for you, fruits are not your friend, okay? And a lot of people are kind of surprised and maybe a little shocked to hear that, because people always associate with fruits with being good, right? Not, however, if you're looking to lose weight. Fructose and the fruit is 100% sugar, right? There's a lot of sugar, some more than others, like grapes, very high in sugar. They taste wonderful, but they taste wonderful for a reason, because they're very high in sugar, all right? So keep that in mind. You want to skew those 9 servings a day towards vegetables. And grains, right, you want to seek whole grains, and not whole grain flour, all things like that. There's a lot of, here's where you see most of the manipulation of the labels and verbiage, okay? So they can call something whole grain, but they mean whole grain flour. Well, that's not whole grain, right? Flour, by definition, has stripped out some of the fiber and all the good, nutritious part of the grain. That's why grains and getting true whole grains is such a problem for most people. This includes brown rice, whole grain bread, and quinoa and oats. Yes, most of those are whole grain, but if you look at whole grain bread, that's going to vary tremendously as to what's really in it and how healthy it actually is. Protein, take as small amounts of lean, low-fat protein, 6 to 8 ounces a day. Frankly, in my opinion, that 6 to 8 ounces is on the low end of what you want to target. If you're going to strive, as we said earlier, to have protein with every meal and snack, well, that's certainly going to put you over that 6 to 8 ounce target, and you should be. Right? Now, protein includes lean meats, fish, dairy, eggs, beans, nuts, seeds, and I'm going to really move to strike that last one there. Okay, please avoid soy at all costs, male or female. But in particular, males have a problem with soy because it does contain a chemical. It's called an isoflavone. You don't need to know that. But basically, it's a chemical that mimics estrogen. Stay away from soy. Marketing, again, has convinced Americans that soy is a great protein source. It's not. It's actually very poor quality protein. So you want to stay away from the soy. And dairy is a little question mark too. We aren't by nature designed to have dairy. So you can be quite healthy and quite robust without dairy in your diet. Okay. Well, what about calcium? Well, that's what the vegetables come in. All right. Finally, fats there. You want to limit saturated fats, although they are saying that saturated fats, again, is not the big bad enemy that's been made out to be for decades. We do a certain amount of saturated fats is actually good for us, right? And you want to make sure the fats you do have contain omega-3s, poly and monounsaturated fats, such as avocados, olives, vegetable oils, fatty fish. That's a great source of omega-3s and essential good fats are in there, nuts and seeds, as it said earlier. Omega-3s, why do you hear so much about omega-3s, by the way, very quickly, is before we go on to the next slide, is that because our diets are made up of omega-6s, 3s, and 9s, but food processing takes out the 3s, right? So now you have this big imbalance that we used to be nicely balanced between the 3, 6, and 9, and now not so much anymore. So we need to take in omega-3s consciously through fish or as a supplement through fish oil tablets. All right, keep that in mind. So let's move right along to the next slide here, and we're going to talk a little bit about balance again. This is we're diving into each one of those topics we introduced earlier. What and when to eat. Calorie pacing is called. 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks per day is basically what your target should be. All right, you want to choose small meals that bring you that you can bring with you on the run. And you want to eat every 2 to 3 hours. That is really important because when your blood sugar gets low is when the poor decision-making jumps into play, okay? Snack ideas, obviously fruits and vegetables whenever possible, but the next one there, nuts and hard-boiled eggs and hard cheeses, even dips and lean protein, those travel pretty well, especially the hard-boiled eggs. It's a great option, and especially mixed nuts, right? Just throw them in a little sandwich bag, and you're good to go, and you're going to have a very healthy option. And if you do eat grains, again, that asterisk next to the people who have weight management issues, grains are not your friend, right there with fruit. Okay, you want to, people say, Art, I need to lose 10, 20 pounds. What can I do? I said, well, drop the grains and drop the dairy, and the weight's going to fall right off. And that's, again, usually one of those things that comes as a shock to people. But having true whole grains, which, like I said, is hard to find, that is a good option for you. Okay, and it does give you that quick glycemic hit, right? That quick sugar hit that sends your insulin levels up, and then very shortly, if you eat all grains, you're going to be hungry again very quickly. So just keep that in mind. So the benefits of all of this are an increased metabolism, better control over your appetite and portion sizes and your food choices. If your sugar gets too low, that is, you don't follow those 3 meals, you don't get your snacks in, your sugar levels get really low blood sugar, you're going to make bad choices. It's just human nature. It's just what the brain desires. So you want to have a plan for what you're putting into your body, all right? And you're going to stick with that better if you keep well nourished and keep your sugar levels under control throughout the day, all right? So energy balance daily is the key, all right? Next slide, we're going to take a look at something different here. On the next slide, we have a little technical difficulty here. we could move forward to the next slide.
Art?
Yes.
Hi. So we're removing a slide as usual. So what slide should we be on?
Well, it's we were just going along just fine. I'm on the balance, what and when to eat, and it's not moving.
Balance and how, right?
Yeah, and balance and what and when to eat, calorie pacing, increased metabolism. I've said all that. Then I said energy balance daily is the key. Next slide, and then nothing happened. That's where we are.
Tips for eating out. How about that? Balance and how much?
No, I don't have that slide. It stopped moving here.
Oh, balance, what, and here we go.
I'm on balance, what and when to eat.
Okay, we're there.
I'm still at the same slide. We want the next slide from this one.
Yep, and we're there. It's
Okay, there we go. Now we move. Go forward to. This is the slide I've already read.
Okay.
Here we go. Balance. How much? Okay. We're back to it. And tips for eating out. This is going to be really crucial for every one of us because certainly the Americans eat quite a few meals out. If it's during the workday, you're going to have lunch out there, and some people even eat breakfast on the go, constantly just on their way to work. So this is going to be really important for everybody. So keep these kind of rules of thumb in mind, if you will. All right, 1 cup is about the size of your fist or a tennis ball. So a serving size of cooked vegetables or grain should be half a cup. Right? Now, 1 ounce is about the size of your thumb or a poker chip. And what they're saying now is that serving size for cheese or peanut butter, or generally you hear that term used a lot for good fats. Right? Again, we've talked about that a little bit. Don't be afraid of the good fats. Okay, they're not going to be harmful to you as much as a high level of carbohydrates will be harmful. Right? In fact, the whole ketogenic diet and even Atkins before that are based upon that premise of that fat is not necessarily the enemy. Right? 3 ounces is about the size of a deck of cards or the palm of your hand. That's a serving size for meat. And frankly, I don't know a lot of people who limit the serving of meat to the size of their palm. Generally, it's larger than that. So keep that in mind when you're totaling up the calories for the day. You generally, if you're sitting down to for example, a dinner at the end of the day, it's very unlikely that you're going to limit the meat size to 3 ounces. All right, so be aware of that. So, and this should kind of be a no-brainer at this point, but you want to avoid all-you-can-eat buffets for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the portion sizes are an issue. Right, it's very hard to be disciplined to stick to a normal portion size, and all you can eat is not all you should eat. All right, and the other thing to consider when it comes to buffets is the quality of the food is generally quite poor, even if it is a buffet, a salad buffet. So you want to bear that in mind. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide and see what else we can put out there. So when we talk about, as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, the My Plate recommendations, these are the newest recommendations from the government, and this plate is designed to show you how your food should be portioned. I won't get into how incredibly off the old food pyramid was, but this one is slightly better, I will say, but we'll put some critiques in here in a minute, right? It is important to enjoy your food, but eat less and avoid oversized servings, which we've talked about already as a typical kind of a Western Americanized problem. The next tip is to fill half your plate with fruits and vegetables. And again, I'm going to put an asterisk there. You see, even in the diagram there, the size of the vegetables is larger than the fruit, and please keep it that way. You want to skew always towards making the vegetable portions much bigger than the fruits. Right? Grains should always be whole grains. We've talked about that already. It can be quite problematic to find true whole grains that aren't really poor in quality and processed. Choose lean with protein. All right, and again, you can probably expand that protein. I would, in fact, go as far as to recommend you flip that protein to the size of the grain portion and the grain the size of the protein portion, right? Just flip those in proportion there, okay? This next one is a very, actually, you wouldn't think so, but it is a very controversial issue. You're going to switch to fat-free or low-fat milk. What they're finding now is that if you are going to drink milk, make it whole milk. Why? Well, because the fats in whole milk are actually good fats. So, and what else is in milk is lactose, which is the milk sugar, right? So think about it logistically. If you strip out the good fats, what are you left with? Sugar water, right? So that's that one necessarily. You should probably put a little asterisk next to that one because that's not necessarily an entirely true statement. Right? You want to follow these guidelines for eating out and eating on the go whenever you're traveling. Some people kind of throw rules, all these rules we talked about today, out the window when it comes to traveling or, vacation when you're away. Kind of the rules go out the window. Avoid letting that happen. All right, let's go to the next slide. And as you push towards the finish here, we're going to talk about foods to limit. Whole foods versus food products. Whole foods are in their natural form. A great example of this is sliced cheese. If you look at the label on sliced cheese, it should say American cheese, not cheese product or cheese food. Those are really not forms of cheese. They're just kind of very processed oils and things like that that are not, that they're in the shape of cheese, but they're really not cheese, all right? So just that's a great example there, okay? Processed foods often have added sugar, salt, and fat. When you process a food, think of it this way, the more man gets his hands on the processing of the food, the worse that food is for you. So processed foods are often have added sugar, salt, and fat to make them taste better, right? They just want to sell more of the foods. They put those things in it to make us buy more of them. So all of those things increase your risk for diseases like diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. Certainly, by elevated weight is going to elevate your blood pressure and all the kind of spirals from there. Be very, very wary. I've kind of alluded to this a couple times of the food labels that contain the truth about and the health about a food product. They should contain the truth about it, and that is very regulated by the FDA. But you have to be aware of the things like the serving size. One thing that you presume is a single serving container, it actually contains 2 or even 3 servings. So they're able to cut those numbers that you're reading in half or even by 2/3. So just be aware of the truth, the real truth on the food labels, okay? Other things, we mentioned this before, healthy, natural, cholesterol-free, none of those have legal meaning. So when you see those, you can just mentally just cross them right off your list because they don't have any true meaning. The ingredient list gives you the power to know what you're eating because it's all listed by weight. That is, as you see them on the label, listed under ingredients, is in proportion to how much of that stuff there is there. So when you see something like sugar listed first, you know it's a problem, okay? And especially hydrogenated oils and sugars. If you see that on the label, hydrogenated oils is trans fats. Read that as trans fats. They try to come up with different kind of less evil names for it, but just keep that in mind. Hydrogenated oils are a bad thing. Okay, moving on to the next slide then. We're going to take a look at meal planning. We've already talked about having a balance between carbohydrates, proteins, and healthy fats. Here are some real-world examples. Vegetables stir-fry with beans and rice. Fish, potato, and vegetable. Meat stew with vegetables and grain. Barley is actually a really good whole grain choice, right, in its true form, right? I mean, if it's been boiled and it's part of a stew, that's great. Obviously, when they start to process barley, that's when you lose all that positive things, all the fiber that's in it, all the positive, nutritious parts of it. Here are some food-saving tips, and this is a real popular one around my household, I can tell you that. Cook extra food, save in the fridge or freezer to bring with you for lunch at work during the week. I actually recommend to people that they pick 2 evenings a week, a Wednesday and a Sunday, for example, and cook all their food. And then your fridge should look like Tupperware, 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 and you're all set to go with healthy alternatives for the entire week. And you should do that every 3 or 4 days because, let's face it, vegetables do tend to get soggy after a couple of days and not that good for you. Cooked meat tends to be able to have about 4 solid days where you can use it. Then after that, it starts to degrade a bit, and you want to get rid of it and replace it with new stuff. Some of the tools to have on hand: rice cooker, blender, steamer, and saute pan. I can tell you right now from personal experience, and I talk to a lot of cooks, if you have a blender and a steamer in your kitchen, you're covered for the vast majority of healthy meals that you're going to want to cook for yourself, okay? So if you don't have those, that's a great thing. Then run out to Walmart. They're very, very affordable. Go and grab some of those, right? And you want to keep cooked or fast cooking grains on hand. My darling and the current darling of the nutrition industry is quinoa, right? The funny spelt word and funny pronounced word. Keep that handy. It's great cold. It's great warmed. It's multicolors. It's very versatile, very high in protein for a grain as well. You want to store frozen berries and greens like spinach in the freezer. They freeze very well, they keep very well, and they're great in instant shakes. So you can have something nutritious to eat in about 3 minutes if you have those handy in the fridge. And also keep nuts, nut butters, and beans in your cabinets at all times. So you can always have that quick, healthy alternative. All right, so moving ahead to the next slide, we're going to talk about healthy eating while eating out. We've mentioned this a little bit. We're coming back to it. I'm going to add vegetables and color to your plate whenever possible. Making smart choices in restaurants can be tough, admittedly, right? But you want to think about those healthy options. And sometimes even fast food places do have salads and fruits that are better. Skew, again, towards the salad. Try to avoid the fruits. And you want to, when you go using those food kiosks, by the way, they often have hard-boiled eggs, yogurts, and salads in them. And you want to make those your only option when you come to these choices here. And don't be afraid to ask for substitutions, like a side of steamed broccoli instead of fries. Very common choice. Automatic fried food is recommendation. Yes, it tastes good. It's supposed to taste good. It's not good for you. Really, really bad for you. That should be a once or twice a year treat, right? If you like fries or fried clams or something like that. That should be the exception, not the rule. Substitute it. Don't be afraid to substitute in that vegetable. And know how your food is cooked, right? Is it fried? Is it grilled? Is it baked? Is it steamed? It does really matter at the end of the day. So stay away from that fried stuff. So moving on to the next slide. We're going to look at eating on a budget very quickly here. Planning your meals, making a list and sticking to it. You should never go to the supermarket and just wing it, right? It can't be a random activity. You should plan out, go in there, and right, remember that general rule, go around the outsides of the supermarket and out the door. As soon as you go into those internal aisles, you're talking about processed foods, okay? Never, of course, rule of thumb, it's just like going out to eat, never go hungry, right? You're going to overspend and overbuy foods, and you're going to buy bad foods, stuff that your brain recognizes as tasty that normally you would not buy, right? You're going to check out weekly sales in the loss leaders. That is the stuff that they put really particularly on low price just to get you into the store. Make sure you're aware of them, and you take advantage of those things. All right, don't be afraid to clip coupons, all right? Make it a regular habit. Before you head out the door, grab the newspaper that you put in the recycling over there and scan through the coupons real quick for the good stuff that you need. All right, and buy store brands. I mean, if you've never taken the time to look at the label, you will quickly see that the store brands are exactly the same product in the same amount, with the same concentration, everything as the brand names, only they're much, much less expensive. All right, use the store's loyalty card if they have such a program in place, and understand pricing, right? The price that's on the final price of a product is not necessarily an indication of whether you got a good deal or not. Know the unit pricing, which means how much does it cost per unit, like per pound, per ounce. You have to know those type of things. So become a smart shopper is the lesson there, right? So you also want to use leftovers, great meals. We talked about that. And some people avoid leftovers for some strange reason, but a lot of food actually I've found taste just as good, if not better, when they're in the form of leftovers. Right? Free food that you do not use well in advance to avoid wasting food, and shop local. Right. The great part is that farmers markets are now really popular. They're popping up everywhere, and especially in the spring, summer, and fall months. All right, a little tougher in the winter, of course, but in the cold climates. But take advantage of your seasonal markets, and so that's going to be the tips for eating on the budget. And let's move on to the next slide, and wrap this up. The art of eating. All right, this is going to be really important. these are kind of little subtle things, the behaviors that you can do. And again, this harkens back to the book I recommended earlier from Michael Pollan called In Defense of Food. You want to sit down to a meal whenever possible, right? Eating for the enjoyment of eating. Ask for modifications to meal when eating out. We just said that. Keep healthy snacks on hand. This is kind of a really good review. Now, chewing your food completely. We live in a society of speed, right? Everything needs to be done quickly. Chewing is part of the digestion process, really needs to be done slowly. And you'll find if you actually do a little test with yourself, you're going to find it's not so easy to do, to chew slowly and chew thoroughly. All right, eat with others. Eating and dining in general should be a very social interaction. It enhances your satisfaction and digestion, believe it or not. The body absorbs nutrients and digests best when it's relaxed. So that all stress eating and stressful eating, eating on the go, all of that contributes to poor digestion and poor absorption. You want to get involved with the purchasing and preparation of your food whenever possible. That goes back to the farmer's market thing. So next slide. Keep all of these little tips in mind as you're eating. So here's some final statistics here. These are updated from the dietary guidelines, right? 69%, so I actually underestimated at the beginning of this talk, 69% of the United States population is overweight or obese. This includes 40% of children. So the new guidelines are going to focus on reducing calories while increasing physical activities, which is not that good. When you look at the physical activity being cut back in schools, and unless you're part of a private league or something, often, unfortunately, our kids don't have much choice besides sitting in front of a video game. It's all about making better choices. All right, this is kind of a summary chart here: the fruits, the vegetables, the whole grains, fat-free or at least good fats, right, and dairy. Consume less processed foods, less salty foods, less foods high in sugar. Eat lean and be aware of your portion sizes. Increase your physical activity. And it's all not just about looking better, but feeling better inside. All right, all of this is contribute to you living longer and healthier. So next slide. So here's your final guidelines, right? 6 easy guidelines to remember. Save your food at meals, but consume less. Learn portion control for each food, and all of us know if that's a problem for you, you know it. So let's avoid the buffets and when eating out and control your portion sizes. You can do that by using smaller utensils and smaller plates, by the way. Make vegetables and fruits the bulk of your plate. Always skew towards vegetables. Find local farmers markets. You want to eat healthy fats with each meal because they keep you fuller longer. And you watch out for the hidden sodium in food, right? You usually don't think of it as salty, but like breakfast cereals. Salt, they throw it in just about anything to enhance flavor, but unfortunately you're can quickly go over that 1,800 milligram per day guideline that they put out there for us all. Right? Make water and calorie-free beverages your primary source of liquids rather than sugar, calorie-containing drinks. It's estimated that Americans get 50% of their daily calories from liquids, which is a huge mistake. You want to skew towards teas and coffees and even fat-free. I hate to say diet soda, but it is a better alternative than the sugar-containing drinks. Next slide. Excuse me. So the bottom line, accept the fact that we need fewer calories overall. Unconsciously, you should be encouraged that more is better. It's simply not true. Think of food as you would fuel for your car, right? How well do you want to run, right? Well, quality of the food you take in will determine that. Savor and enjoy every bite. Balance overall calories with plenty of physical activity and exercise. Remember we said at the beginning, it's what we were meant to do, although it gets pushed aside very, very quickly in most people's lives, unfortunately. Stay healthy no matter where you are. Don't be lazy just because you're on the road, right? Don't throw the rules out the window. Next slide. You always want to search out those healthy options. And finally, this is something I always want to point out, that the availability of the EAP, these are benefits that most people, unfortunately, don't even know exist. Right? The EAP can help in a lot of different ways with face-to-face counseling sessions, legal and financial consultations, child and elder care consultations, referrals, daily life resources, ID theft, recovery, free credit monitoring, all kinds of stuff. They have something called My Strength, which is a health club for your mind. Depression consultations is a multi-resource toolkit. And they're a very, very comprehensive website, by the way. And you see it in the upper corner. I want to draw your attention there. AnthemEAP.com, and there's your login information. Plow and Hearth is your password to get in there. It's got all kinds of assessments and wellness libraries and legal forms, okay? I hope all of you have benefited from today's discussion and maybe taken away one or two good points. Let's move on to the next slide. And again, if you walk away from this discussion with one or two valuable insights, then we've done our job. So I'd like all of you to have a great day and stay healthy.